8 years. That's how long I poured my life into Vertex Innovations. 8 years of being the first one in the office and the last one out. 8 years of canceled vacations, skipped holidays, and birthdays celebrated quietly with a single slice of cake at my kitchen counter because the system needed me. I wasn't just an employee. I was the lead systems architect, the one they called when everything went sideways, when the code broke, when the impossible needed to be built from the ground up. And somehow, every single time, I found a way to piece it back together, to make it work. My creation, my life's work, was Apex AI, an operations platform driven by artificial intelligence, designed not just for efficiency, but with a core logic built on integrity and trust. It wasn't just software. It was a complex, evolving entity, a blueprint for how systems should interact with the world, ethically, intelligently, securely. We were days away from its major investor launch, the launch that would secure the company's future and, I thought, finally secure mine. Months of sleepless nights had gone into fine-tuning every single line of code, every neural pathway of the AI. It was ready, stable, brilliant. But somewhere along the line, while I was busy building, I missed the signs that something was fundamentally wrong, not with the system, but with the people running it. Looking back, the anomalies started subtly months before that Wednesday afternoon. Strange server pings late at night when no one should have been logged in. Small, fragmented log entries that vanished before I could trace them fully. Access attempts to restricted core directories disguised as routine maintenance checks, routing through network segments usually associated with executive admin accounts. I couldn't prove anything, not definitively, but the feeling in my gut was a cold, hard knot. It was enough to make me cautious. It was enough to make me build defenses not just against external threats, but against the shadows lurking within. Quietly, without anyone else knowing, I integrated advanced integrity checks deep into Apex AI's core architecture. A unique digital signature identifiable only by me, woven into the very fabric of the code, a watermark of creation. And the Guardian Protocol, a sophisticated, layered defense mechanism designed to protect the system's core logic from unauthorized control. It wasn't about destruction. It was about preservation. It was about ensuring that Apex AI would only function reliably under trusted, verified authority. My authority. The email arrived around 3:15 p.m. The subject line was blank, but the sender was Mason, our CEO, and it was marked urgent, meeting required. Included in the invite was Jessica from Human Resources. My chest tightened. Blank subject lines from Mason were never good. I grabbed my laptop, the one filled with Apex AI's final code, the Guardian Protocol fully operational, and walked down the familiar glass hallway. On my left, the development lab buzzed faintly, the soft hum of the servers I'd built and configured echoing like a mournful song. On my right, I passed the framed photos lining the wall, company milestones, success stories, grinning faces. Every single photo included Mason. None included me, the architect behind many of those milestones, despite my 8 years of being there for every single one. I passed Chloe's desk. She was one of our junior developers, bright and earnest, and she always looked up to me. She glanced up as I walked by, a worried frown creasing her brow. I managed a small, tight smile, trying to project a calm I didn't feel, before turning the corner towards the executive conference room. Mason was already there, sitting at the head of the long, polished table. His fingers were steepled, his eyes gleaming with that specific brand of smugness you only see on someone who thinks they've already won. Beside him sat Jessica from HR. Her face was a mask of professional detachment, her gaze fixed somewhere just past my shoulder. She didn't look at me. "Riley," Mason began, his voice smooth, like he was reading from a script. "Please have a seat." I remained standing. I'd learned long ago that silence, a lack of immediate reaction, often unsettles people more than anger ever could. It forces them to fill the void. Mason cleared his throat, slightly annoyed by my inaction. "Riley," he repeated, his tone shifting to something colder, "we appreciate everything you've contributed to Vertex Innovations over the years. Your work on Apex AI has been foundational." He paused, and my gut twisted. This was it. "However," he continued, his voice losing all warmth, "we've decided to take the company in a new strategic direction. Effective immediately, your role as lead systems architect is being dissolved. Your services are no longer needed. No warning. No discussion. Just 6 sterile words and a corporate euphemism for being thrown out like yesterday's trash. After 8 years. After Apex AI. I kept my face still. My mind, however, was racing. Not needed? After I built the entire core of your investor pitch? Of course, I said, my voice level, surprising even myself with its calmness. Would you like my laptop now? Jessica blinked, a flicker of surprise crossing her otherwise impassive face. Mason, however, just nodded, a satisfied little smirk playing on his lips. Yes, he said. That would be ideal. I walked to the table and gently placed my laptop down. It felt heavier than it should, carrying the weight of everything I had built, everything they were trying to take. As I straightened up, the door opened, and 2 security guards stepped quietly into the room. They moved to flank me, a silent, unmistakable signal. I turned to face Mason one last time as they positioned themselves on either side of me. He looked so confident, so assured of his victory. I couldn't help but offer him a small smile, a genuine one this time, but laced with a meaning he wouldn't understand until it was too late. Good luck, I said softly, with the investor meeting tomorrow. Mason raised an eyebrow. We'll manage, Riley. I let the smile widen slightly. Let's hope so. As the security guards escorted me out, I kept my gaze fixed on Mason until the very last moment. Then, we turned the corner towards the elevators. I stepped inside, the guards remaining respectfully, or perhaps strategically, outside the doors. As the brushed steel doors began to slide shut, I watched Mason's self-satisfied face disappear from view. And then, as the doors sealed me inside the small, enclosed space, the countdown began. Not on a screen, but in the heart of Apex AI, triggered by the Guardian Protocol, system integrity compromised. Unauthorized creator credential removal detected. Guardian Protocol activating. The digital timer in my mind started ticking down. 9 minutes. What Mason didn't know, what no one knew, was that the Guardian Protocol wasn't just a line of code. It was the ultimate defense, a final integrity check built into Apex AI specifically to prevent it from being controlled or repurposed by anyone other than its verified creator. It didn't destroy the system. It locked it down, making it unusable, unreliable, and resistant to any command that didn't come from me. Because I had learned the hard way that the most dangerous threats weren't outside hackers. They were the smiles across the conference room table, the colleagues who became betrayers, the people who thought they could take what wasn't theirs and get away with it. They thought they were cutting me out, but they were really cutting out the only person who truly understood how Apex AI worked, how to keep it stable, and how to bypass the defenses I had woven into its very core. The elevator dinged, opening onto the lobby level. I walked out, carrying a single cardboard box containing a few personal items, a framed photo of my cat, a wilting potted succulent Chloe had given me, and a few notebooks. The real valuable item, the small USB drive containing the Guardian Protocol override keys and my proof, was secured elsewhere. I wasn't angry. I wasn't surprised. Betrayal, when you've seen the signs, just doesn't sting as sharply. Outside, the sky had darkened, mirroring the storm that was brewing within Vertex Innovations. While Mason and his cronies upstairs were likely toasting their perceived triumph, 9 minutes were ticking down towards the moment they'd realize the devastating scale of what they had truly lost. 9 minutes. That's all it took. At minute 1, the system registered the critical authentication error. It was irreversible from their end. By minute 3, internal processes within Apex AI began to loop endlessly, unable to authenticate the core commands without my verified credentials. At minute 6, the dashboard started flooding with anomalies. Red warning boxes blinked on every engineer's screen as Apex AI's internal monitoring flagged multiple subsystems as unstable, compromised by the core integrity failure. I could almost hear the frantic calls, the rising panic in the server room. And by minute 9 it happened. The platform crashed. Not a simple reboot and fix crash. This was a fundamental meltdown, a self-imposed coma triggered by the Guardian Protocol's final defense layer. The kind of failure that made even the bravest IT leads freeze in horror. The investors were scheduled to view the demo first thing the next morning. But now, The system was in total disarray, completely unusable, with no clear way for anyone at Vertex to bring it back online. I imagined the moment Mason realized. How the smug smile must have vanished from his face. How the illusion of control must have shattered, leaving him staring at the wreckage of his future. But I wasn't there to see it. Instead, I was sitting on the couch in my small apartment, sipping a cup of chamomile tea. My cat, Archimedes, purred softly on my lap. The television was on, some mindless reality dating show, the background noise filling the sudden silence in my life. I stared at my phone waiting. Nothing yet. Then, at exactly 5:12 p.m., it rang. Unknown number. I already knew who it was. Riley? Is that you? Came a rushed, anxious voice. It was Daniel, one of the lead systems engineers, one of the few people at Vertex I actually respected, a genuinely good guy trapped in a bad place. Daniel. Hey, I replied, keeping my voice calm. You didn't hear this from me, okay? He whispered urgently. But it's down. Apex AI. Completely. Mason's going ballistic, screaming about sabotage. He's got half the engineering team tearing their hair out, and nobody can figure out what the hell happened. I smiled a small, private smile. And what do you think happened, Daniel? He hesitated for a moment. I think you built something too damn smart to be messed with like that. And I think Mason's finally learning what happens when you burn the person who holds everything together. He paused again, his voice dropping lower. They're going to call you, he said quietly. They need you, Riley. Badly. He was right. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, it was Sarah, Mason's executive assistant. Her usual calm, professional tone was strained. Ms. Riley, she said, her voice unusually stiff. Mr. Mason requires your immediate return to Vertex Innovations headquarters. It is urgent. A car will be dispatched to your location within the hour. I almost laughed out loud. Tell him I'm busy, I replied. Maybe tomorrow afternoon? A long pause on the other end. Then, Sarah's voice, softer, laced with genuine desperation. Riley, please. That please. It was everything. It wasn't just inconvenience they were facing. It was existential terror. Apex AI wasn't just a product. It was the entire foundation of their investor pitch, their valuation, their strategic future. And now it was a brick. A multi-million-dollar, non-functional brick. I stood up, setting Archimedes gently on the couch. I walked to my desk, not the one at Vertex they'd just taken from me, but the small one in my apartment. I opened a hidden compartment and took out the sleek black USB drive, the one that held the keys to Apex AI. Not the keys to destroy it, but the keys to soothe it, to reestablish trust, to bring it back online. You see, what Mason and the old board, anyway never understood was that Apex AI wasn't just code to execute tasks. I had built it with complex ethical protocols, a dynamic intelligence designed to adapt and learn, but only under the guidance of authorized, trusted inputs. I had embedded a central logic framework deep within its core. Trust must be earned. Credentials can be revoked. Loyalty cannot be faked. When they removed me from the system, they triggered a fundamental breach of this protocol. The AI interpreted the sudden, unauthorized removal of its primary architect and trusted source, me, as a potential hostile event, a core system compromise. And it responded exactly as programmed. Protect itself, quarantine suspicious commands, shut down dangerous inputs. By 7 p.m., another call came. This time, the caller ID simply said, Vertex Innovations. It was Mason himself. Riley, he said, trying and failing to sound calm and in control. We seem to have experienced an unexpected hiccup with Apex AI. An authentication bug, perhaps. A bug. I repeated, feigning concern. That's troubling. Right before the investor launch. Precisely. He jumped on it, relieved I was playing along. We'd like your help in resolving it immediately. Of course. I pretended to think, tapping a finger against my chin. Resolving it. Is this purely a freelance gig then? A one-time consultation? Or am I back on payroll? Silence stretched across the line. I could almost hear him sweating. Then, a heavy sigh. We can discuss that when you're here. I made him wait another hour. letting him stew in his desperation before I finally agreed to come back. When I arrived at Vertex Innovations headquarters, the place was exactly as Daniel had described, bordering on chaos. Engineers looked haggard, alarms were still flashing on monitors in the distance, and there was a palpable, frantic buzz of desperation in the air. Mason met me in the executive boardroom. His tie was loose, his hair disheveled. He looked like a man who had just lost everything, but hadn't quite processed that he was incredibly lucky I had even shown up. "Can you fix it?" he asked again, the false bravado gone, replaced by raw need. I pulled the USB drive from my jacket pocket and set it gently on the polished mahogany table between us. "I can," I said calmly. "But, as I said on the phone, we need to talk first." Mason's eyes narrowed, a flicker of his usual arrogance returning despite the circumstances. "You think you're in a position to negotiate now, Riley?" I leaned forward slightly, my voice steady and unwavering. "Mason," I said, looking him directly in the eye. "In this moment, I know I am." Because in that moment, the power had fundamentally shifted. I wasn't just the woman they had discarded hours ago. I was the indispensable key to the multi-million-dollar future they had gambled everything on. And I had absolutely no intention of handing that key back for free. Mason stared at the USB drive like it might explode. His foot tapped impatiently under the table, a nervous tell. His jaw was clenched tight. This contains the fix?" he asked, his voice tight. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch, let him squirm under the pressure. The clock was ticking towards the investor meeting, and he knew it. "It contains the protocol update," I said at last. "Apex AI is functioning exactly as designed. Its Guardian protocol detected an integrity breach, the unauthorized removal of its verified creator. It no longer recognizes you, or anyone at Vertex, as a trusted authority." Mason scoffed, a disbelieving sound. "That's absurd. We own it. We paid for its development." I gave a soft, humorless laugh. "You paid for a product, Mason. You didn't pay for understanding. And you sure as hell didn't pay for loyalty." His face flushed red, but he didn't argue. He couldn't. He knew he had lost the upper hand. I stood up and walked slowly to the large window overlooking the city skyline. From up here, Vertex Innovations looked powerful, imposing, just like the photos on the wall projected. But I knew better. I'd seen how fragile the foundation truly was, how easily it could crumble when trust was broken. "I gave you 8 years, Mason," I said quietly, my voice carrying across the silent room. 8 years of my life. And you tossed me out like I was nothing. No warning, no discussion, not even a thank you for the system that was about to make you rich. I turned back to face him. "You didn't just fire me. You removed the person who built your entire critical infrastructure, the very heart of your pitch, without the basic decency of a conversation. And now, the system you wanted to showcase to your investors doesn't trust you. Tell me, Mason," I finished, my gaze unwavering, "how do you think that looks from the outside?" He flinched, just slightly. It was enough for me to know the reality had finally sunk in. He stared at the USB drive, then back at me, his face a mask of defeat. "Tell me what you want," he muttered, the words forced out. There it was. The shift. The moment the balance of power settled decisively in my favor. "I want full explicit recognition as Apex AI's lead architect and creator," I stated calmly, laying out my terms again. "My name on every document, every patent, every press release associated with the platform. You made me a ghost for 8 years. I make your system vanish in 9 minutes. Fair trade." Mason swallowed hard, his atoms apple-bobbing. "What else?" 25% equity in the Apex AI platform," I continued, holding his gaze, retroactively vested from its inception. "And a seat on the board of directors, effective immediately." His eyes widened in genuine shock this time. "You're out of your mind. The board will never." "They will," I interrupted, my voice firm. "If they want their investors to show up tomorrow. Because without that update," I gestured to the USB drive, "you don't have a demo. You have a very expensive, very public failure." He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly through his nose, like a bull trying not to charge. For a long moment, he was silent, weighing his options. Defeat or capitulation at an enormous cost. You planned this, he said at last, his eyes narrowing, a hint of accusation in his voice. You set us up. No, I replied, shaking my head. I protected what I built. Another long pause. Then finally, he gave a slow, reluctant nod. All right. I'll need it in writing, I added. Legally binding. You'll have it by morning, he muttered. No, I said, my voice firm. Tonight. Before I hand over anything. His gaze sharpened, meeting mine across the table. You don't trust me. I smiled, a genuine, cutting smile. You fired me. We stared at each other, a silent war fought in expressions and posture. Eventually, he broke eye contact. He stood up and motioned to Sarah, his assistant, who had been standing silently outside the glass door, a look of veiled anxiety on her face. Call legal, Mason said, his voice flat. Now. It took 3 hours. Legal drafted the paperwork, emailed it to my attorney, made the necessary edits, and returned it with digital signatures. I didn't even blink when Mason, through Sarah, tried to reduce my equity from 25% to 20% in the third draft. I simply stood up, took the USB, and walked towards the door. If the paperwork doesn't match exactly what we discussed, I said, pausing with my hand on the doorknob, my voice echoing slightly in the tense silence, the system will stay down. And so will your company. Sarah, looking paler than before, rushed over with the corrected version 5 minutes later. The contract was now legally binding. I returned to the table and pushed the USB drive towards Mason. This will restore Apex AI's system trust protocols and reinstate full function, I said. It will see me, and only me, as the verified creator and trusted authority again. I paused. It will also initiate an oversight loop, a function of the Guardian protocol I built in. From now on, all high-level administrative changes, all access attempts to the core system, will be reported directly to me, automatically. If you try to sideline me again, if you try to violate the system's trust protocols, Apex AI will know. And it will act accordingly. Mason looked at the drive as if it were a venomous snake. He didn't argue. He simply nodded and whispered, Understood. I turned to leave, my heels echoing on the marble floor. Just before I reached the elevator, Mason called out, Riley. I paused, glancing over my shoulder. You could have burned us to the ground, he said quietly. Why didn't you? I met his gaze. Because I didn't build Apex AI to destroy things, Mason, I said. I built it to protect them, including myself. With that, the elevator doors closed once again. But this time, I wasn't being escorted out in disgrace. This time, I was ascending. The next morning, I walked into Vertex Innovations through the front door. Not with a visitor badge, not flanked by security. I walked in as the lead architect, the CTO designate, and a member of the board, with a signed agreement in hand and a digital trail of my reinstatement filed with HR before dawn by the oversight loops logging function. People looked up from their desks as I passed. Some looked surprised, others cautious, unsure of how to react. Some were visibly relieved to see me. They knew the system was back online because I was back. Daniel met me near the dev pit, a look on his face that spoke volumes. You really did it, he whispered, a mix of awe and relief in his voice. I'm not here for revenge, Daniel, I replied quietly, though a small part of me knew that wasn't entirely true. I'm here to make sure no one touches Apex AI again without understanding exactly what they're holding. Walking the halls felt different. There was a quiet tension. Whispers followed me, some speculating I'd blackmailed my way back in, others unsure what version of events to believe. Some people avoided me entirely, but I didn't need their approval. I had something more important. Access, control, and proof that I belonged here, not just as an employee, but as the indispensable architect of their future. There was a certain thrill in walking the halls like I owned the place, because, in a very real sense, I now owned its most valuable asset. Mason didn't look at me during the investor demo. He gave the usual corporate spiel, future of automation, adaptive security, scalable intelligence. But when he introduced Apex AI, his tone shifted, becoming slightly strained. And now, he said, forcing a practiced smile, I'd like to introduce the system's original architect, our co-lead developer, and strategic advisor. Riley Blake. There it was. Not just a mention, but a title, an acknowledgement, public validation in front of potential investors. The room full of investors turned their attention to me as I walked to the front of the stage. My new position felt earned, paid for in long hours and hard-won battles. Good morning, I began, my voice clear and steady. What you're about to see isn't just a platform. It's a system designed to think, adapt, and most importantly, protect. Not just against external threats, but internal ones. I let that line hang in the air for a moment, earning a few raised eyebrows. I didn't care. I wasn't here to be subtle anymore. Apex AI isn't just reactive, it's predictive. And above all, it remembers who helped build it. We ran the demo. Apex AI neutralized 5 complex simulated threats in real time, flawlessly. No errors, no delays, not even a flicker. After the final test case completed, the room erupted into excited murmurs. A few investors approached Mason, already discussing numbers and projections. But many others came directly to me, asking about scalability, expansion, technical partnerships. For once, they saw the brain behind the brilliance, not just the brand name. Later that afternoon, Mason called me into his office. He was tired, yes, but there was a sharper, more calculating look in his eyes than I'd seen in weeks. You made an impression, he said without looking up from his screen. I wasn't trying to impress, I replied, walking in but not sitting down. I was doing my job. He finally looked at me. Some of the board members, especially Evelyn and Alexandra, he mentioned the new board member's name, they think we should keep you more involved. Officially. I raised an eyebrow. And what do you think, Mason? I think you're dangerous, he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. But necessary. I smiled slightly. You should have realized that 8 years ago. He didn't respond, and I didn't wait for him to. The following weeks were complex. I was the CTO, but the shift in power was still settling. There were still whispers and uneasy meetings. But I didn't need their comfort. I had something more important. My position, control over Apex AI, and the constant stream of data from the oversight loop. One afternoon, while reviewing the oversight loop's audit logs, I noticed something strange. Apex AI had flagged multiple access attempts from restricted administrative accounts after I'd returned and reinstated full security protocols. All of them were traced to accounts loosely associated with the finance department, a department I knew Mason had recently taken a keen interest in, consolidating certain functions under his direct oversight, a detail I picked up from board briefings. I dug deeper. The oversight loop provided detailed logs that, when decrypted using my tools, showed partial downloads of Apex AI's core source code, documentation, internal algorithms. Encrypted, fragmented, but unmistakably mine, identifiable by the digital signature I had woven into the code years ago. They weren't trying to hack it, they were trying to clone it. Silently. I compiled a summary of the logs and confronted Mason the next morning. Why is someone in your finance operations trying to duplicate core Apex AI files? I asked, dropping the printed summary on his desk. He barely glanced at it, waving a dismissive hand. Oh, that. Some internal audit thing, probably. Don't worry about it, Riley. I'll look into it. No, I said, my voice low and firm. You won't. I will. That night, the oversight loop sent me a high-level threat notification. Internal breach risk level, critical. Pattern identified. System cloning attempt. Apex AI, through the logic I built, had recognized a new, dangerous pattern, not just accessing data, but systematically pulling specific code strands necessary to replicate its core functions. Someone was trying to create a phantom copy of Apex AI, not to destroy it, not to alter the original, but to spin it off, perhaps under a different name in a different entity. One without me attached to it. Mason had signed the agreement to bring me back, giving me equity and a title. But someone else, clearly connected to him, still wanted Apex AI completely separated from its creator. This time, without the drama of a public firing. They hadn't learned the first time. But this time, I wouldn't just defend myself. I would defend everything I had built. And this time, I had Apex AI as my silent, vigilant ally. The first rule of working in tech, especially in security, Is this trust the system, not the people? I learned that the hard way. Apex AI had always been more than just a piece of software. It was my creation, my blueprint for intelligent protection. But now, it was whispering to me in warning tones, its internal alarms sounding about a threat deep within the company's own network. Someone was trying to replicate its code, quietly, persistently, and they were close to succeeding. The logs from the oversight loop painted a picture of a systematic effort. Encrypted data requests routed through layers of VPN masks, disguised as legitimate internal traffic, using seemingly random admin credentials. But Apex AI, with its predictive analysis and pattern recognition, didn't rely solely on access logs. It observed behavior, frequency, anomalies. And whoever was doing this wasn't careful enough. They worked after hours, always between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., always accessing the same folders, the same specific strings of code that linked to the system's neural prediction engine, the learning core, the heart of Apex AI. Remembering my earlier suspicions and Mason's dismissiveness, I decided I needed to confirm who was behind this. I leveraged my deep system access to set a new trap, a digital tripwire, more targeted than the general oversight loop. Nothing obvious. Just a line of seemingly useless bait code nested within a common documentation packet that these cloning attempts were accessing. It had no function on its own, but when accessed via the specific method the cloning script was using, it triggered a silent, high-priority alert routed directly to my secure channels. At 2:41 a.m. that Friday morning, my secure phone buzzed. Someone had taken the bait. When the ping came through, showing the access credentials used, I froze. The credentials weren't random. They belonged to Sarah, Mason's executive assistant. The same Sarah who had called me that night after I was fired, her voice tense and formal. The same Sarah who had stood silently outside his office as I negotiated my return. The same Sarah who had smiled at me every morning since I came back, her expression unreadable. Only now, looking at the access logs tied to her identity, I realized that smile had always been hiding something cold and calculating. The next day, I requested the full access logs tied specifically to Sarah's account from the oversight loop. What I found was damning. Over 40 unauthorized code pulls over the past 6 weeks, all masked as internal audit requests, multiple download attempts, 2 confirmed outbound data transfers sent to an unlisted domain address. But here's the part that made my blood run cold, the part that explained why they were doing this and why Mason was so dismissive. The domain she was sending the files to didn't belong to a competitor. It belonged to Vertex Solutions Group. I used my elevated access to cross-reference this name with internal legal and financial filings. Vertex Solutions Group was a shell subsidiary, quietly created by Mason 3 months prior, right around the time my initial suspicions about strange network activity began. Mason was listed as the primary executive officer. And Sarah? She was listed as the co-founder. They weren't just trying to push me out again. They were trying to steal Apex AI outright, clone it, package it under a new name with my name stripped from the patents, and sell the clone to investors while keeping the original running just long enough to cover their tracks. This wasn't just corporate greed. It was blatant intellectual property theft, a double-cross planned months in advance and executed stealthily after the first cruder attempt failed. But they forgot one crucial thing. I had built the system to fight back. That night, I activated Phase 2 of the Guardian Protocol, the countermeasure specifically designed for unauthorized cloning attempts. It wasn't destructive to the original system, which remained secure under my oversight, but it was devastatingly disruptive to any attempt to copy it. From that moment on, every time unauthorized code was accessed via the method Sarah and Mason were using, Apex AI's Phase 2 would flood the intruder session with false data, lines of fabricated algorithms, scrambled version histories, decoy prototypes designed to look real but leading nowhere. To a thief, it would appear as if they were successfully downloading the crown jewels. In reality, they were downloading digital garbage, a poisoned chalice. The next morning, Mason summoned me to his office. His face was pale, his jaw tight. "Riley," he said, cutting straight to the point. "We need to talk. No greeting, no pleasantries." "I assumed we would," I replied, stepping inside and closing the door behind me. He held up a tablet, rotating it towards me. On the screen was a chaotic mess of code, broken strings, misfired scripts, corrupted data. What once looked like the neural engine of Apex AI now looked like digital wreckage. This, he said, his voice strained, is from the internal development backup we've been compiling. It's scrambled. Completely. Looks like someone accessed it without proper clearance, I said, keeping my voice deliberately even. Apex AI has countermeasures against unauthorized duplication. It protects itself. Mason stood up, leaning across his desk, his eyes narrowed to slits. Riley, I haven't sabotaged anything, I stated calmly, meeting his gaze. Apex AI is working exactly as designed. It protects itself. Even from you. His expression hardened into a glare of pure hatred. And if I told you, he asked quietly, menacingly, this has already gone too far? That investors were promised a new version, an expansion, built under a new entity. I tilted my head slightly. Then I'd say, I replied, my voice cool and steady, you're about to have a very uncomfortable board meeting. He stared at me, the raw hatred creeping into his expression, the kind that bubbles up when someone realizes they've been completely outplayed at their own game. You don't get to win this, he said, the words a low growl. I smiled, a small, confident smile. Mason, I said softly. I already did. You just haven't read the source code. And with that, I walked out, leaving him alone in his office, staring at the worthless digital clone he had tried so hard to steal, wondering which parts of his empire were still real and which parts had already crumbled under the weight of his own deception. But I wasn't done yet. The next move wasn't just about defense. It was about ensuring that no one, ever again, could try to steal what I had built and called their own. 3 days later, the board of directors met in emergency session. It wasn't called by Mason. It was called by me. Leveraging my new position in board seat and armed with irrefutable evidence, I formally requested the meeting. I had sent a comprehensive report to every member of the board, including Evelyn Sharp, the chairwoman who had once called me brilliant but too quiet, and Alexandra, the cautious new member who valued data and integrity. The report was cold, hard fact. Access logs from the oversight loop detailing Sarah's unauthorized activity, analysis confirming my digital signature in the copied code fragments, documentation of the Vertex Solutions Group shell company, and its registration details linking Mason as the primary executive and Sarah as co-founder, timestamps tracing the attempted data transfers. A full, undeniable trail tracing the deliberate theft attempt of Apex AI's source code and the clear effort to cut me out after I had returned. I didn't have to embellish a single word. The truth was damning enough. Mason walked into the conference room 20 minutes late. His face looked thinner, his eyes sunken, like he hadn't slept since our last conversation. Sarah didn't come at all. As the board members reviewed the documents I had submitted, silence filled the room. Some looked genuinely shocked, their eyes widening as they connected the dots. Others, like Evelyn, looked unsurprised but wary, their expressions grim. Alexandra scanned the technical logs and financial documents meticulously, her face a mask of concentration. No one said a word until the last page was turned. Then Evelyn Sharp, a woman known for her no-nonsense approach, folded her hands on the table and looked directly at Mason. Mr. Mason, she said, her voice calm but carrying absolute authority. Do you deny any of the information presented in Ms. Riley's report? Mason cleared his throat, visibly struggling to find words. This is outrageous. Fabricated. Sarah. Miss Sarah acted alone. I leaned forward slightly, my voice clear and steady. Chairwoman Sharp, I interjected politely but firmly. Vertex Solutions Group lists Mr. Mason as the majority shareholder and primary executive officer. Miss Sarah is listed as a secondary officer or co-founder. While the unauthorized transfers came from her account, the entity intended to receive the stolen code, the entity designed to profit from the clone, was his. This wasn't Ms. Sarah acting alone. This was Mr. Mason's entity, executing Mr. Mason's plan. Mason said nothing, his face a mask of impotent rage. Evelyn turned her gaze to me. And Apex AI, Ms. Riley? The original system. Is it operational? Intact. I nodded. Yes. The original Apex AI platform is stable, secure, and intact. The cloned instance they were attempting to build using the stolen code fragments is now flooded with decoy code and protective misdirection via Phase 2 of the Guardian Protocol. It's irreparable. But the working system, the real Apex AI, is under my direct oversight and control. And it can't be stolen again? Alexandra, the board member, asked, looking up from the report, her expression shifting from skepticism to something akin to admiration. No, I replied. Because it no longer trusts anyone without specific, high-level biometric authorization. My authorization. I looked around the table, meeting each board member's gaze. And yes, I am happy to extend oversight to include independent verification teams moving forward. But from now on, Apex AI protects itself. Legally, through its documented ownership and control structure under my guidance. And technically, through the deep integrity protocols I built into its core. There was a long pause. Then, Evelyn Sharp closed the folder on the table with a quiet thud that echoed in the silent room. She looked at the board members, then back at Mason. I think, she said, her voice final, it is time for a change. The vote was unanimous. Mason was removed as CEO of Vertex Innovations within the hour. Sarah's employment was terminated retroactively. The shell company Vertex Solutions Group was immediately dissolved, its assets, or lack thereof, frozen. The board named me the permanent CTO and formally granted me controlling interest over the future development, licensing, and strategy of Apex AI. But that wasn't what satisfied me most. The titles, the equity, the control, they were important, necessary. But what truly resonated was that for the first time in 8 years, I didn't have to fight to prove my worth. It wasn't just asserted. It was documented, sealed, recognized by the highest level of the company I had helped build. I spent the next few weeks navigating my new role, rebuilding trust where I could with engineers like Daniel and Chloe, with the product team, even with the legal department who now address me by name and title, not just the tech lead. The atmosphere in the office slowly shifted from tension to cautious optimism, and then to genuine excitement as we prepared for the official Apex AI investor launch. The launch went ahead on schedule, stronger than before. We signed 5 major contracts in the first 2 weeks, including one with a global healthcare provider whose cybersecurity breaches had cost them millions the year before. I stood at the front of the stage during the product reveal, no longer a shadow behind the screen, but the visible, confident face of the future of Vertex Innovations and Apex AI. In the final moments of the presentation, as applause rang through the room, my smartwatch buzzed discreetly. It was a silent notification from the oversight loop, a message from Apex AI itself. System status, secure. Threats neutralized. Integrity restored. Protections active. I smiled. Because Apex AI wasn't just my work anymore. It was my creation, my legacy, and my armor. In the months and years that followed, I made sure every future iteration of the platform carried the same core logic I had built in. Ethics first, ownership protected, transparency enforced. We didn't just build smarter systems. We built safer ones. Not just from external hackers or viruses, but from greed, from betrayal, from the kind of silence that lets darkness flourish. I had lost 8 years of being seen, but I had gained a lifetime of knowing that what I built and who I was could withstand any storm,